Hello from Bugeye Guys. Today, Bodie and I, thank you Bodie, are going to give you a quick tour of standard operation for a Bugeye. This is sort of our video owner's manual series, and we're going to talk about the cockpit and the controls. So starting with the door release, a lot of people may not realize, or you maybe noticed but never thought about, there's no external door handle on these cars, which is just delightful because it keeps them clean and sleek. But the door release is here right inside, and that goes down to open the door. And then we have a series of very simple instruments that often don't work, but we're constantly at work to make them work for you. This is the fuel gauge, and if you're new to these cars, you know that you never really want to trust this fuel gauge. You just want to verify with the trip odometer that what you're reading is correct. This one isn't going to give us good information. I'm not sure how we ended up with a half tank and 12 miles, but generally what I'm going to do with these is zero this out every time when I fill up. And there is, if I can get you there, right here is a little stalk that pushes up and you twist it to reset the trip odometer. And you should be looking for anywhere between 150 and 200 miles on a full tank of gas. It's a 7-gallon tank of fuel, 7.2. So if you get roughly 25 miles to the gallon, that's roughly 175 miles. That's about when you got to be watching this. And if you're new to these cars, I recommend you go when it says 125 miles, you fill it up. If it takes 7 gallons, you know you were almost empty. It should take more like, 3 or 4 gallons. And a lot of times these fuel gauges will stay pegged at full and run for a long time that way. And then they sort of quickly move through their arc when you're sort of beginning to run out of gas. So they're not linear the way you would expect them to be on a modern car. We have the horn here, which is, oh, sorry, we're now at attention. We've now gotten, it's okay, buddy. Sorry. That's how you turn on the dog, is you beep the horn. This one is a non-stock configuration with a ammeter. And this would normally be the location of the turn signal indicator, which would be right here. But instead we have it moved out to this side when somebody located this really sleek little Lucas ammeter in place. The turn signals only work with the key on, and they are actuated here. That would be left and right. And like a lot of people, they just forget and they leave them on, or they don't see the indicator. That's pretty common for Bugeye pilots, but you obviously want it in the center to be off. We have the tachometer here. People ask me, where do I shift? Really depends on you. The cars are pretty torquey and you can shift them almost anywhere as long as it doesn't shudder, vibrate, lug, or that you don't grind the gears, you're okay. But generally, if you're out for spirited driving, you might shift at 4,000 RPMs or a little more. I don't think that a lot happens between 4,000 and 5,500 redline. Depends entirely on what sort of build you have. Obviously, you may have an engine that's set up to over rev, and that's useless information. But for a lot of our clients who are not really gearheads, certainly if you shift between 2,700 and 4,000 RPMs, that's kind of a nice reference point to keep the car kind of in its happy zone. And you should be able to feel that when the car is sort of pulling nicely and not being stressed by your actions. Here we have a choke, and this is an upgrade that we sell in our catalog and also that we often do for our customers' cars. And this is, in fact, Sean's Bugeye. He lives in Connecticut, and he's going to take this one home. But for Sean, we have a locking choke, which means you pull it out and twist it to lock it. And you can also use the high idle function and lock it for that. Now, the interesting thing about these, and people constantly have trouble with this, so I'll spend a minute here and go through the basics of this. The choke is really only an enriching device that you only need when the engine is very cold. If it's room temperature, you're going to try to start the car without any choke at all. And if it doesn't light up or fire off, or however you describe it, catch, some people say, then you can apply choke, crank it again, and as soon as it fires, you're going to try and take the choke off. And if it misfires and stumbles, then you can find a happy medium. And maybe by the time you pull out of your garage, you'll be ready to turn the choke off again. So your goal is to drive with no choke. I've had clients tell me that they can't keep the car running, and generally when that's the case, it's because they're using choke after the engine no longer needs it. And if you think about it, that's like artificially enriching the mixture for no good reason, and it's going to cause the car to drive poorly. Your car is set up, if we tune it, so that it will run perfectly with no choke. And you use this as a supplement if the cold weather requires it, but if you supplement it and the engine's warm, it's not going to run right. I hope that helps you make sense of the choke. The secondary thing about choke that's cool is that the first portion is high idle, so it's possible you don't need the extra fuel from the choke, but you need the RPMs a tad higher for idling when it's cold, and that's what you can use the choke for. And the idle, when you start to see a 1500 RPM idle, you want to get this back in again, or 1200. Should be idling somewhere around 900, 1100, somewhere in that range. Over here we have the oil pressure. This is kind of like the lifeblood of the engine, or the heartbeat of the engine. It tells us how is our blood pressure. What are the vital signs? Well, oil pressure should be 50 at 3000 RPMs, and that's just a ballpark number. We've had engines that have been higher and lower, but it shouldn't be 0 at 3000 RPMs. If it is, you're just days away from an engine rebuild. So you'll want to turn off the engine if this goes to 0 and find out if you have no oil in the engine or if it's leaving a big puddle. This is an early warning system. There's no idiot light for low oil pressure, so you should really be constantly thinking about this. It should be in your mind, somewhere in the back of your mind or the corner of your eye. You should be keeping a close eye on this. You don't have to obsess about it, but you want it to be in sort of a normal range. And temperature, similarly, it shouldn't go above 212. Sometimes on a really hot day, you might be driving at 210, but we target 160. If you're in Palm Desert, as one of our clients was, it might run a little bit hotter, but we sell a great aluminum radiator to try and address that, and a better fan as well. If you're getting the car from us, we're going to have that conversation with you to try to optimize the cooling system. The wiper switch is here. It's only one switch, one speed, one switch, one speed. Very simple, push-pull. And you never want to operate your wipers with them on the glass. So I'm going to reach over, and they need to be, they're key fed. The power is key fed. In other words, the key has to be on. And that's how the wipers operate at blinding speed. And there's no rain sensor, no intermittent, no nothing. You got two choices, on and off. And these park. So if I turn it off here, they run until they park. And that's how you check your wipers. A lot of these cars have scoring marks from the wiper blades. By doing that with the blade up, you eliminate that risk, and you can still exercise your wipers and check them out. The other thing is the heat control. Now, this is another thing that people get confused by. This control is designed to twist. Can you hear the difference? That's the blower coming on. It's a one-speed blower, only operates this way. That's it. That's all you get. Just like the wipers. Very simple. 1958, they didn't think you needed an infinitely adjustable climate-controlled cabin. You just had a one-speed blower. Now, what's interesting about this is it pulls, and a lot of people get confused because you can't twist the blower to the on position when it pulls. And that's because when you pull this, what you're doing is you're closing an air door that's right behind the firewall, and that cuts off the airflow into the cabin. So if you turn on the blower now, you'd be cutting off the airflow to the blower, and you could potentially break the blower. So it will only operate when it's on, when it's in, and it operates by twisting it. Most of these switches have worn out by now. It's nice to have an original one that still works. This is the lighting control. S for side lights, H for headlights, and off. So when you turn the key, you have to be mindful you don't accidentally also turn the lights at the same time. We've had people get confused by that. This is the washer pump. Now this thing, under the best of circumstances, didn't work very well. And why you would really need washer fluid to dribble all over the cowl of your Sprite? I don't know. So most people don't bother with this, but that is the function of this accessory. It's that's great. A little puff of rust comes out. You can't make that up. It's like Yosemite Sam's pistol. It leaves a puff of smoke or a flag that says bang. This is the starter, which will work when the key's on or not. So it won't fire because the key's off. I'm not giving the car fuel or ignition, but the starter will engage when you pull that. A couple more things. You have under here a little secret switch. We sell this switch. We call it the secret switch in our catalog. And what that does, whoops, sorry about that. Thank you. Let's see if it works. We'll turn on the lights to power this switch up. And what that does is, yes, look at that. It turns on the panel lights. If you look at the edge of the tachometer here, you'll see the lights on and the lights off. So that secret switch is for that all-important function. You can see the fuel light of turning off those pesky interior lights. I never understood why you would need to do that, but because they're so dim as it is, it's not like they're in your eyes. But it's on now when it's to the right. We've had many clients get out of the car and scrape this with their knee. It's just a little slide switch. And then they call up and they say, how come my dash lights went out? It's generally because you've bumped into that switch. One other thing that's kind of fun for old time's sake is the high beam or main beam switch. You see it there, right there above my toe? That silver button is your high beams. And here we have a high beam indicator, which is working on Sean's car. High beam, low beam by toggling that switch. And it will only work when you actuate the headlights. One more thing that you should know about while we're getting into the details. Back here, we have a little air door. Let's see if I can get you in there to see it. Okay. Right here, if you can see that, is a flap. It's closed. And that's open. And that feeds air down into the footwell. There's one on each side. It feeds air to your dog. And interestingly enough, that's how crude this was. When you turn the fan on right now, the air is going to come out. I can feel it. You can't see that on the video, but it's blowing quite enthusiastically into the footwell. And I use that word enthusiastically generously, but it is a pretty good blow, if you will. There's a second door here that's closed. Now that I've opened it, I'm splitting that air between both sides. So if you're alone and it's cold, you want to close the passenger side and you open the driver's side and you get the most airflow on your shins. You can also, if you have the tonneau on, you can open that side and get more hot air under the tonneau. But that's another way to use this system to your advantage. When they're both closed, the air is directed to these demisters, which are, again, are used very generously because usually Rain-X works better than the wipers and a towel works better than the demisters, but that's how they designed the car. And if you get one of these, it's helpful that you know how to operate it. So that is your basic owner's manual for how to operate the controls in a Bugeye Sprite from Bugeye Guys.